My guest today is a veteran journalist who anchors live from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange every single day. He's covered the White House, Capitol Hill, created his own documentary series, and now hosts Taking Stock, one of the most watched daily finance shows out there. JD Durkin, welcome. I always start with the exact same question. In 30 seconds, tell me what you do and who you are.
My name is JD Durkin. I'm a financial broadcast journalist from the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange. I host the daily closing bell show for the exchange called Taking Stock. I also recently launched the only live independent show from the New York Stock Exchange that airs on Thursday mornings called the JD Durkin Show. I'd covered politics for many years, and I love being in the center of it all for the world of capitalism and finance, and call the Yankee Stadium of Finance, the great New York Stock Exchange, my home every day.
Yeah, 100%. It's powerful the amount of places that you've been and the amount of different people that you've met and got to connect with over your years. How did you go from covering the White House and Capitol Hill to anchoring on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange?
That part, well, that transition kind of started. My first real broadcast job was a then pretty young network called Cheddar, which originally back when it launched around 2016 was positioned as like the first post-cable news network. The idea of it was it would be in all of the streaming social media places. It would reach at the time more of a younger millennial business savvy viewer. And I got a little bit of experience on the trading floor as soon as I went to work for Cheddar. And then pretty quickly, they moved me down to Washington to go be a White House correspondent. Before joining Cheddar, I had served as senior editor for a website called Mediaite, which is still around. It's run by Dan Abrams, who was my boss and mentor for years. And that was kind of my first official journalism job, covering the ins and outs of the cable newsrooms, the world of politics, the 2016 presidential campaign, and had that experience with Cheddar, so it seemed like an intuitive fit for me to be the DC guy. So I went to Washington for about 5 years, covered most of Trump's first term, covered the first year of Biden, covered those Congresses, those campaign trails, and then came back to the stock exchange almost 4 years ago and have been just pretty much solely focused on the financial markets since then.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you co-created the Pivot Counties, which is a documentary where you travel to counties that flip from Obama to Trump. What did that teach you about how regular people feel about the economy versus how Wall Street may see it?
That was a little bit more of a politics show than it was market. So I wasn't really talking too much about the economy, though there's obviously a close link. I think what I most learned from that experience was the importance of leaving the DC New York bubble, right? We refer to this as like the Acela corridor crowd. Those of us that like work in media in one of the two cities and kind of do a lot of work back and forth. It's just 3.5 hours on the train. And it's a great reminder every once in a while that you got to get out of this little mid-Atlantic bubble and go travel to people where they are. So um, we went to Belen, New Mexico. It was probably one of my favorite small towns in America. We went to Mankato, Minnesota. We went down to the Florida Keys for that show. Great episode in Northampton County, Pennsylvania. We did Colfax, Iowa. And those were really fascinating small town America portraits of like what drove their political decision making, how they felt about Trump, how they felt about where we were in terms of how we talk to one another and how we talk about our politics. And still to this day, that's probably some of my favorite work that I've ever done, Jack. Honestly, it's incredible. It's an amazing country, and you realize like this country is so many little countries pieced together. And every once in a while, it's great to get out of New York.
Yeah, it's like 51 different personalities just all in one. What does it actually feel like personally anchoring live from the stock exchange every single day?
It's wild, man. I always like to say it's chaos. Our show is chaos. I do the closing bell show, so there's usually a really large crowd that's gathered for the celebratory nature of the bell, and we take our viewers through the trading floor. Like whoever I'm working with on camera is just shoulder mounted, nothing's on tripod, so we're on the fly, and it's interviews on the fly. I'm doing hits on stock performances or my favorite ETFs of the day, or doing analyst calls while I'm moving through the crowd. And in that way, I think it's so different and unique from anything else you see that's broadcast. I've been in and around this place for almost 10 years. And I've worked for a bunch of networks. I've done work for The Street. I worked for Cheddar. I worked for FinTech. I worked for Schwab Network. And I'm still a contributor for CBS News. And I do all my live shots for CBS and BBC from the trading floor. And there's nothing quite like taking stock because everything else is usually a stagnant shot, like you and I are talking from a studio or something. But taking stock really takes you through the ins and outs of it. So it's awesome. It's a big privilege, and it's definitely not something I ever take for granted. I love it every day.
Yeah, it's awesome. How much do you think that personal research, analysis of stocks, watching shows like yours is important for personal investing?
It's a great question. It's actually a similar question I ask a lot of guests too, which is basically what resources do you consume that make you a smarter investor? And I think anything like this that you see, especially from anyone who you may look around the industry whose careers you really admire, or people who talk about this stuff in the right way, I'm researching constantly. I always feel like my full-time job is really researching, and I do a little bit of TV afterwards because my family and friends will tell you like I go home and I'm researching. On Saturday mornings, I wake up, I'm looking at charts. When I was a politics reporter, I was the same way, dude. I was like watching old Supreme Court archival footage that I could find or going through old dockets and old cases. I still watch a ton of C-SPAN because I still love politics. And so just having that brain for curiosity to always be learning more. And then part of it's a little bit, if I'm being honest, being hard on myself to, I get frustrated not knowing things. Or if I come across something I feel like I should have learned, then it's very important for me to figure that out. It's like, all right, that's a big, dense topic. I got Memorial Day weekend coming up, for instance. How am I going to spend that time to try and learn something I didn't previously know? And my gauge of that, Jack, is if I can explain it simply, then I know it well enough. And even if I kind of get it, but I can't describe it to someone else, that means I don't know it well enough. So just hammering it down until I'm really comfortable with the material.
Yeah, it's a powerful mindset of always trying to be learning. Like even as yourself, so deep in your career at such a good place, and you're still trying to learn on the daily, which is so never stop learning. I think that's a huge thing. And what is your one biggest tip on the fly interviews? So you do that a lot in your career, and I think you have a great insight of actually doing that.
Even if an interview is on the fly, you always have to be prepared. You always have to have a back pocket of questions ready to go. And I really learned this covering Capitol Hill because Congress is insane. Covering Congress is insane because you got 500 something independent contractors. Yes, they belong to one of two parties, but you just never know walking through the hallways of the Capitol who is going to round the corner. And even if you don't have a full camera set up, everyone's got a smartphone with an audio recorder. And so you're running up to Senator so and so and saying, hey, a couple quick questions if you can. You have to have those questions. If you're going to be the person who breaks that bit of news or gets that highly sought after quote or response from a notable person, it's because you have the question handy. And so I'm always writing backup questions. I'll give you an example. I don't even mind saying this. Like Dan Ives is a well-known Wedbush analyst. He covers Tesla and Apple and Nvidia and all these stocks. Last night, I wrote like 5 questions on Nvidia earnings for Dan Ives just in case I saw him today. He wasn't here
Yeah.
today. He might be here tomorrow, but I've got
hmm
those questions and they're in a doc and I have them and I pretty much know them up here. So always be prepared. But then when you're doing the live interview, always know when to drop what you have prepared because you're actively listening to what the guest is saying and you have to ask a follow-up.
Yeah, I always like try to prepare questions, but on the fly, I'm always gonna like go into depth on what you're saying, just to get more input on what's actually happening. Um, so Main Street versus Wall Street is a huge difference right now between how everyday people feel economically and what the market is signaling. So what do you think is actually going on there?
The difference between Main Street and Wall Street, I mean, the stock market is not the economy, but there is a bit of a correlation. And even if many Americans are not directly invested into the market, they probably are in the way of a 401k or an IRA. So there is definitely a stronger correlation and a connection. Um, I think people's perception of the economy oftentimes is not more complicated than how much do they feel like they're spending on things? And so if you ask the average American, how's the economy doing? They're going to say, well, gas is now 4.60 a gallon. My rent went up to this. My groceries now cost this, and they used to cost that. That to me is a bad economy. I'm going to say the economy is not doing well. And I think that tracks, and that's fair. But there's an old Democratic strategist before your time. His name is James Carville. And if you don't know, I encourage you and your viewers to go look up James Carville. He's got a lot of great gems. But he famously said when he was working alongside then President Bill Clinton, "It's the economy, stupid." That's a very famous phrase. It's the economy, stupid. It ain't more complicated than that. What determines presidential elections? What determines who controls and power? It's the economy. How do you feel about it?
Mhm.
As we get closer, Jack, to this year's November midterm elections, if more people feel sour about where the economy is, history tells us that's bad news for the incumbents, who in this case is the Republicans. And they're going to swing back the other way, give Democrats the House, maybe give Democrats the Senate. Um, but if they people actually look around, they're like, yeah, okay, I actually feel pretty good about where I am, and I feel confident that I could get another job, etc. Then that probably doesn't bode as poorly for the party that's in power. So I think that disconnect, it's just how people feel about their own purchasing power in their own personal situation. There are times when more people feel great about it, and there's times when they don't. But Wall Street is driven by a lot of capex spend and AI and hyperscaler and data center growth. And those are a lot of the things that are really driving the market to all-time highs. I don't think the average person's really thinking a lot about those.
No, definitely not. Like I talk to even my teachers and they have no idea what's going on in like the markets at all. And I think that's interesting because there's so much value in learning the markets every single day. Like I read the Wall Street Journal every morning, just as a habit to learn as well. But what is the biggest mistake that you see retail investors make when they try to read financial news?
Well, there's something I've learned, and a lot of people smarter than I am say, which is by the time it's consensus, it's probably too late. So by the time you're reading about it in a financial news headline,
Mm,
there's a chance the market has already kind of digested it. So I know a lot of people probably see something and they say, "Oh, great, let me get on that trade. Let me try and get into that stock that's now already up, 120% this year and is like off to the moons." Um, Sometimes that does pay off. I mean, if when we first started writing or talking about a stock like SanDisk, this memory company that's just been parabolic, it's explosive growth, and you bought SanDisk stock at the first headline, you've probably still done pretty well because it has just continued to move up. Most of these securities in my experience don't trade like that. And so it's I think it can come down to not always knowing exactly how to do your own research. I think people are well intentioned, but oftentimes by the time you're diving into something because you read about it or heard about it elsewhere, most
absolutely.
of that momentum you may have missed.
Yeah. So there's a whole generation, my generation, getting their financial education from YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, um, instead of maybe textbooks or even the Wall Street Journal and stuff like that. Does that excite you or scare you?
I think mm, that's good. This is a good question. I get asked a version of this a lot, and I'm still kind of think the jury's still a little out. I think net it probably balances out because what I am hopeful for is people who are chartered market technicians, people who are CPAs, people who are qualified analysts. They tend to be a little bit older, and so the challenge for them is they have to become increasingly social media savvy. They have to reach your classmates in school on the platforms that they're scrolling through. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot of, no disrespect, random jabroni people who just think they know and
Yep.
throw up a bunch of stuff onto TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is. Um, and say, trust what this is doing. This is an industry that is chock full of trusted veteran voices. They have lived through bull markets, they've lived through bear markets, they've lived through big, scary pull downs, they've lived through parabolic growth. And those tried and true investment lessons, the things written about by Benjamin Graham, the things preached by Warren Buffett, I think there are people that are more polished, legitimate, sometimes older voices who still need to learn how to make that sort of content and tell those stories in a way that's, vertical with text on screen or whatever it is. And so net, I think it's still a little too early to tell, but if I had to give one answer, I'd say I'm more excited and I'm more hopeful for those opportunities for the industry.
Yeah. Like me personally, I obviously read the Wall Street Journal in the morning, but I'm watching financial news on my feeds come up all day long, and I just see all like the different opinions. Like there's a lot of different biases on maybe some people who are qualified and some people who aren't. And I think it's just got to be like there can't be any blame on the creator. I feel like it has to be totally, you have to do your own research. So like me and my friend started a page where we post like explaining stuff, and we always put not financial advice, do your own research, because you have to do your own research. You can't just go trusting anybody on the internet. That's with everything. But you have this gift for making complex market topics feel immediate and personal. Is that something you had to develop over time, or did that always just come naturally?
That's very kind of you. I appreciate the compliment. I work really hard on that. I guess it kind of comes, maybe it's a bit of both. Maybe as along the way, I kind of had a talent for. And my background, even before the White House politics era, I mean, I definitely come from a background I feel like is one of one. Like there's not really anyone else has the exact career trajectory that I've had. It's very long story short, I had always been a really good, I did a lot of speech and debate. I grew up in New Jersey, so I was doing like what we called forensics. I was
Yeah.
doing speech and debate competitively and very, very good at a young age. Like I joke, like I was the LeBron of New Jersey high school speech and debate. Like my trophy shelf was just enormous. Like there was not a competition I was doing in high school. I was not finishing top three. I went to a school called Seton Hall Prep, and we were just like we were a powerhouse in everything, it felt like. And then when it came to speech and debate, it was like, damn, seeing how prep boys are like good at that also.
Yeah.
And I was kind of in that culture where it was like, yeah, like I was on the hockey team, I was on the track team, and I did that. Like that was the culture I kind of came up in, which is like hustle on your sports, hustle on your
Yep.
this, have your daily disciplines and transfer it over. And then when I set out in my career, I always wanted to be a comedy writer. That's how I set out, and I lived in LA and I wanted to be a showrunner for the industry. But I was always doing comedy performance. I did years of improv, years of sketch comedy. I was a director, a producer, a writer. There was no part of stage, comedy stage life in New York and LA. And I did some time in Chicago for a summer, where I didn't try and learn all of that. And all of those experiences are like the same skill set I take on a taking stock every day. It might not sound like it, but maybe that's kind of a long way to say some of it is natural, some of it is honed from just doing things like this since I was 13.
Yeah. Yeah. Practice is key. Like my speaking skills, even from starting to talk to the camera a couple months ago, has just increased so much in school with this. Like everything has just been getting better over time. I'm 17, already paying attention to the markets. What is one important thing someone my age needs to understand about money, that they were maybe not taught in school?
Yeah, and well done, dude. You're doing an awesome job. One thing about money, well, I've learned personally, you always have less time and you always have less money than you think you do. That's just like, I wish someone told me that at 17. That's just like a universal fact. But and it's an old, you come back to like what's the best investment advice? It's all the stuff you hear over and over again. You're 17 years old. It's time in the market, not timing the market. You've probably heard that before. It's
Yeah.
not about timing when you buy Nvidia stock around earnings. It's like, no. You have an IRA or retirement plan. Before you know it, you'll be off to college. You enter the real world. You'll probably get a job that has some type of employer match for your 401k. That's the type of stuff when I was young, I didn't have a lot of room in my brain for. But the earlier you start, the better because lessons on compounding are incredibly important. And I wish
Oh
they
yeah.
taught that in school, how fast original seed investments into your retirement account grow and grow and grow more on top of each other year after year.
Yep.
And there's a big difference between someone who starts at uh, 25 and someone who starts at 35. Like that first 10 years can make a huge difference in terms of
Yeah.
compounding by the time you retire. So I think you're off to a great start, dude. You're obviously crushing it.
Thank you. Thank you. My last episode was actually all compound interest. It was a
It's awesome.
19-year-old at UNC Charlotte who his entire page is literally just compound interest and the $25 a week rule. And that's what he follows. And him starting young is just going to be exponential over time. But if you could go back to your younger self, or even a couple years ago at Capitol Hill or the White House, what would you tell yourself?
I tell myself when I was in DC, get out of DC and get back to New York as soon as you can, man. No. I always wanted to come back to New York. Like I said, I was from the area, but um, I think I would tell myself, I just keep going, dude. Just keep going. Just keep going. Don't stop. Like you gotta be a little insane to do this. Um, and it's like an unshakable belief in yourself. And there's so many days you're like, I didn't get the scoop, the live shot was bad, that
Yeah.
interview didn't go well. That like I still contend with that stuff. And it's I would tell myself, just keep going. And whatever you're facing in the moment that feels so big, like no one else is thinking about it. And if it's not going to matter to you 5 days from now, it shouldn't matter to you 5 minutes from now. Take everything in stride and everything will pass.
Yeah, it's an important outlook on life. Not everybody cares as much as you do on the certain thing that you're thinking so hard on, and in the future, it's not even gonna matter that much. You've talked about daily disciplines helping you navigate hard times in your career. What does your morning routine actually look like before the bell rings?
Well, when I get up, I try. I don't always do a great job of it, Jack, but I do try and do like the first hour or so, no screens around the house. Jeff Bezos famously said he likes to putter, for his first little bit of the day. I
Yep.
kind of like to putter too. Um, I clean a lot in the mornings. I do something physical on my hands and knees. It's how I clean my apartment, cleaning dust, moving stuff, clean the dishes from the night before. I'm just kind of engaged with that type of activity where I don't have the
Mhm.
phone. I might have Squawk Box or something on in the background playing just to kind of start to get dialed into the markets. But the first apps I'm always checking are obviously Twitter, unfortunately, but that's a big one for me. I'm always looking at TradingView or whatever trading platform you have to see what pre-market data is doing, what are Asian
Yeah.
equities doing overnight, et cetera, because that sets the pace for us here in New York. And yeah, I try and get my work done for the 4 o'clock show as early as possible. There's some work I do the night before, some work I can do maybe 8 or 9 a.m. And then there's a bunch of work I really can't do until like 3:30, believe it or not, because the market's
Yeah.
changing and evolving that much over the day. So I
Mhm.
just try and be disciplined as I can and get done the big, hardest stuff of the day as early as possible.
So now we're gonna go into a rapid fire segment. So some quick questions and then answers as well. So bull or bear for the rest of 2026?
Bull.
One sector that you're watching closely right now.
Consumer discretionary.
Can you go a little bit more into that?
Yeah, discretionary stocks are the ones you'll spend money on in the economy if you feel better about your situation, a little bit of extra money at a Walmart, a bit of extra money at an
Yep.
Amazon. When those numbers start to dry up, it's indicative that people don't feel as confident and they start to pull back. But if discretionary spending stays strong, it means the consumer's in a pretty good spot.
Biggest moment you've ever witnessed live on the floor.
I mean, first thing I think of is when we had Trump down here a couple years ago. He was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. President-elect himself was down here on the floor, and That's even though I'd covered him and was with him in Washington, that was a pretty once in a lifetime
Yeah.
moment for the trading floor.
Yeah, that's awesome. Most underrated skill in financial journalism.
Ownership,
First thing that you read every single morning before the bell.
Financial Times first or Trading View is probably what I open up first.
So with the Nvidia earnings report coming out today, are you bull or bear?
Oh, Bull for sure. I mean, that
Yeah.
stock individually may be down 8% tomorrow because it often is after earnings, but it's at the center of the AI ecosystem and it's the 800-pound gorilla, man.
Yeah, I sold 20% of my positions on a couple different companies to get more into that. Um, because that company's outrageous and what they're going to be doing in a couple of years.
hmm
SpaceX IPO, buy or wait?
Uh, Obligatory disclaimer, dude. I'm not a financial advisor. No one do
Yeah,
anything with your money based on what I say. But my general rule for IPOs is always wait.
yeah,
Always wait a bit, see how these things settle in.
yep, 100%. What do you think the biggest IPO is of this year? There's a lot.
I think it's gotta be SpaceX.
Yeah,
SpaceX are open, but
yeah.
SpaceX.
JD, this was incredible. I learned a lot, and I hope my viewers learned a lot as well. Where can people follow your work and watch Taking Stock?
Yeah, I'm across all socials at JD underscore Durkin, and Taking Stock airs live from the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange. You can find it on Twitter. You can find it live on LinkedIn. It also airs on Cheddar if anyone has that cable news distribution. And the JD Durkin Show also airs live across all my socials Thursday mornings at 10:30.
Perfect. If you're watching this, follow JD, follow this channel, and we'll see you next time.